Hi, in this video we present the feature modeling functions of DExVariants. A consequence of the picklist approach is that every object becomes a variation point. This, of course, gives you a lot of flexibility, but perhaps too much flexibility. Using feature modeling, it is possible to define rules for the selection. These rules will constrain the selection, but they will also provide the possibility to automate the selection in various specifications. There will be much fewer choices. Selecting a single feature may result in hundreds of specification objects being selected in multiple modules. Being able to model the configuration options available in your generic product may also be quite important. You will, for example, be able to specify exactly how different selectable features are related. For example, a given feature may exclude or require other features. This figure shows how feature modeling is handled in DExVariants. White boxes represent different artifacts. The two green boxes represent the two DExVariants tools that are used for checking and manipulating feature models. To the upper left is the feature model of your generic product. It defines your features and how they are related. The feature model lives in a separate doors module. To the upper right is the feature configuration of a variant product. In DExVariants, this is a pick list selecting features in the doors module that holds the feature model. As the name implies, the check feature model and configuration tool, represented by the upper green box, performs two actions. First, it checks the consistency of the feature model itself. For example, a feature may not exclude its parent feature. Secondly, the feature selection of the feature configuration is checked against the rules defined by the feature model. To the lower left is a set of generic specifications containing reusable objects. Each such specification lives in a separate doors module. Each reusable object has a feature connection to one or many controlling features. This feature connection makes it possible to check that the selection in various specifications matches the selection in a feature configuration. Or alternative, the feature connection even makes it possible to automate the selection in various specifications based on the feature configuration. To the lower right is the set of variant specifications being controlled. In DExVariants, these are pick lists in a generic specification, in the generic specification module. Finally, in the middle is the check update variant specification tool. Based on the feature model, feature configuration, and the feature connections in generic specifications, it can determine which reusable objects that shall be selected in variant specs. Depending on mode of operation, it either just reports which selections that do not match the feature configuration, or it actually performs selection automatically in the variant specification. Let's have a look at the feature model in DExVariants. The feature tree is modeled using the normal doors hierarchy. This means that each feature is a heading object. There are 4 attributes added in the feature model. We have the class, the feature type, requires, and excludes. The class attribute makes it possible to tag objects as features. The feature type tells you in what way you may select features. There are 4 different values here. You can have mandatory features, optional features, one or many features, and one and only one features. And the mandatory features, of course, they need to be selected. One or many feature, you have a group of features here where you need to select at least one, given that the parent feature is selected. With an optional feature, you may select it or you may choose to not select it. So it's 0 or many features. And of course, one and only one. Here with output engine, for example, if you have selected output engine, you need to select either electric power or petrol powered. You cannot select both. The requires attribute gives a list of feature names or the features you require. So for example, if you select fishing, you need to also select rowing. If you select sailing, you may not select rowing. These are mutually exclusive. So if you look at rowing also, it excludes sailing. You may, if you like, mix these feature objects with non-feature objects. You could, for example, add text objects. Like this. This is an info object. Doesn't really disturb the feature model at all. Feature models can be visualized graphically. First, select the tree that you want to visualize. In this case, the entire tree. Then select feature graph in the menu, and you get this. Let's fit the window. Mandatory features are indicated by means of a filled black circle, like this one, for example. And optional features, it's an empty circle, it's white inside. And you also have these one or many features, like these with an M. M indicates many. You may select one or many. But then you also have these S features. That's one and only one features. That's a single selection. You also have some indications about excluded or required features. You can see here blue water, for example. It requires something. And if you hover above this, you can see that it requires navigation. And fishing requires rowing. Rowing excludes sailing, and sailing excludes rowing. Clicking a feature like this shows a property dialog. If you have a really large feature model, it's good to know that you can expand or compress the feature nodes like this. The file menu contains some useful functions. You can, for example, save the picture as a file, as a Windows beta file, or you can print it, or you can insert the picture into the current object. Now let's check the integrity of this feature model. Use DExVariants, check feature model and feature configuration. And since we don't have any feature configurations yet, we should not check this box. Check integrity, everything is okay. But let's introduce some errors here. Let's misspell something. Now we're referring to feature that does not exist. And we could also try to exclude the parent feature. Let's say electric powered excludes output engine. Let's run again and see what we get. When I click a problem, I navigate to the feature where the problem is. This makes it easier to correct the problems. Let's undo the changes. We need a correct feature model to start from. Now let's create the feature configuration. The easiest way to do this is to use the normal DExVariants pick list approach. So what I do is I configure the module for object versioning. This time I don't select anything as protected or inherited. And now I add a variant. Techno variant, for example. I guess it would be nice to include the attributes we had in this other view. Let's save the view. Right now, all the features have been selected for Techno. Let's run the checking tool and see what happens. We should get some errors, I guess. This time we check feature configuration, the one that's defined by Techno Select. And you can see here are some errors. We cannot have both sailing and rowing. So I guess we need to deselect rowing. Let's run again. Okay, we only need to select one of these. We may not select both electric powered and petrol powered. Let's deselect the electric engine. Okay, fishing. We cannot have fishing. And we need to select one of the seaworthiness clauses, not all three. Now it's okay. But I guess the camping equipment shouldn't be part of this feature either. So let's check this. All right, now we have a valid feature configuration. Now let's refresh the filter. Here is now the feature configuration for Techno. And if you want to visualize it, you can use the feature graph tool. So here is the feature graph now for Techno. We can now use this feature configuration to control the selection in other modules. Now let's switch to this system requirements module and see how that can be controlled from the feature model. What you need in this module to make it possible to control the selection are basically two things. You need to have a generic pick list that picks the latest and the greatest of all the requirements or of all the logical objects. If you look at this object number 17, for example, you can see that it exists in 3 different versions. And you need to define which version is the preferred one for the product line. The second thing you need is a feature connection attribute that connects each object to its controlling features. What you specify here is a logical expression, like this one, for example, on car roof or on trolley. This means that if either of these features on car roof or on trolley is selected, then the object gets also selected. If sailing is selected, this entire chapter will be selected. And this attribute is inherited. So if I change it like this, sails, for example, all the child objects also get changed. This basically makes it much easier to set up the feature connection. In this module, we also have the Techno variant. Let's switch to that view. Now we are ready to control the variant selection here in this module for Techno based on the feature connection that we previously did for Techno. So what you do is you go to this menu and select Update Variant Selection based on feature configuration. Here you need to select the module where you have your feature model. You also need to select baseline. No baselines yet. And you select the attribute that defines the feature configuration. In this requirement specification model, you need to define the pick list for the generic spec that selects the latest and greatest. And finally, you need to select the attribute, the pick list attribute to be updated, checked or updated. Let's see if we can update the selection. Oops, we have invalid feature connections. And that, of course, is because I refer to a feature that did not exist when I changed to sales. This should be sailing. Now let's run this again. Okay, since we changed the selection for a number of objects here, and you can see that we changed version here from SCRS 74 to 75. And we included some objects that were not previously included. Thank you for listening. If you need more information, please go to www.syntel.se. There you can get the necessary contact information. Thank you very much.